We now move to a fireside chat on the topic connecting the unconnected from space internet. With the world reimagining and changing at a constant speed, the need to be connected to remains pivotal. How companies are geared into satellite internet channels to gain the moment of technology-based effectiveness is what we'll discuss. We also foresee the perils of regulation and the costs that construe the being of the new revolution. Let me introduce you to the speakers of this session. We have with us Rajiv Suri, CEO in Inmarsat. Rajiv defines the mission of his company as enabling the connected world, which is to connect communities, companies, and countries where and when they need it most, on land, at sea, and in the air. He was previously the CEO of Nokia. Hosting the chat with Rajiv is Rajesh Nambiar, President, Digital Business and Technology and Chairman, Cognizant India. As President of Digital Business and Technology, Rajesh brings together the industry's most compelling technology vision, strategy roadmap, capabilities, solutions, partnerships, and subject matter expertise into a single integrated powerhouse that runs all of the IT services for Cognizant. It's over to you, Rajesh. Take it away.
Connect. Hi, thank you very much, Shreya, for the lovely introduction. Look, I think given the times that we all live in, the pandemic has taught us several things, and as all of us know, and I believe that one of the learnings is how dependent we are all are on the technology, and especially what we all call digital. We saw several businesses which couldn't transform to a digital model, and they've actually gone out of business so far, as all of us know. So, but most people may not realize how critical connectivity is for digital. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to focus on the connectivity issues and very specifically the concept of space internet, communication over satellite in some sense. So we live in a world of, in some sense, a dichotomy where one can certainly fly for 15 hours in a flight from here to the United States, for example, with a decent level of connectivity within the plane. At the same time, we see students in rural areas, probably trekking up the hills to even catch a data signal, right? So, and we always hope that the space internet, if you may, or the satellite-based connectivity will change the seamless connectivity across the globe, anywhere and everywhere. That includes, of course, boundaryless over whether it is land or the sea or space, etc. So this technology can, of course, really connect the unconnected. So whether it is unconnected areas that we talked about, or it's unconnected devices, whether it is stationary and mobile, and this is a lot of potential of transforming and truly help achieve the potential of what we used to call, whether it's artificial intelligence or IoT and all of this new technology. And then broadly what we also call global mobility. So to discuss this and more, we have probably the best person here with us today, and Rajiv Suri. And as Shreya introduced, Rajiv has been a pillar on the telecom industry. I've known Rajiv since his days in NSN and Nokia, etc. And he has one of the, as I said, sharpest points of view in the telecommunication world. So, Rajiv, without further ado, let me start with a question to you. How will this space sector, if you may, broadly connect the unconnected over the next decade?
Great, thanks. And first of all, thanks, Rajesh, for having me. Thanks for the kind words. That's a great question. The role of space will be critical, right? When it comes to ensuring, 100% access to connectivity in every part of the planet, the space sector and satellite communications in particular can, as you say, provide coverage where others cannot. By the end of 2019, some 7% of the world's population lived outside of areas covered by mobile broadband networks. And one can safely assume that most of those areas were also lacking fixed networks. So guess what? Satellite communications provide 100% coverage in those areas already today. So over the next decade, we will see massive capacity from satellites, and accessing that capacity will become cheaper. It'll become easier. There'll be new devices and services that will make connecting unconnected homes, schools, hospitals, and other places truly possible anywhere. But believe it or not, that is the easy part, Rajesh. I mean, what Inmarsat does, I think, is the hard part. Unlike satellite communications providers that provide access to consumers, we don't do that. We connect the most difficult to connect, right? Not just fixed broadband services. We connect the most difficult to connect in all things, assets, machines, etc., on the move. So if you want your connectivity on your flight from Jaipur to Chennai, we can do that. You want connectivity on your container ship leaving from Mundra port and heading across remote seas to the other side of the world, we can do that. Connectivity needed to help with the response to a massive flood, say in Kerala, yes, we can do that as well, even when terrestrial infrastructure has been destroyed, right? So it is also a technology of last resort in those situations. Connectivity for the 30 billion IoT devices that Gartner predicts we'll have by 2025, that too. In short, satellite communications can connect people and things not just everywhere in the world, but as they move about that everywhere as well. And that's something remarkable and something that terrestrial mobile networks, and I came from that world, remarkable and wonderful as they are, they simply cannot do some of these things.
No, that's a very, very an important point that you're making. The distinguish, the difference between, of course, what happens on the terrestrial world, which is what we're doing in the satellite world, which is probably known to many of the listeners as well today. But the question is that how is satellite communication going to shape the as we all call it, the next decade, if you may? How will the new realms of connectivity can create endless possibilities on the again, I'm very bullish about this whole digital acceleration, very specifically around technologies such as artificial intelligence, 5G rollouts that we're going to have, the IoT. I mean, and you talked about connecting the not just the people, but also the objects and systems and things around the world, and creating a very sustainability methods, if you may. So in your mind, how is this shaping over the next decade?
The change will be massive, Rajesh. I mean, the money is coming into the space sector quite fast. Venture capital coming into space companies in 2021 was the fastest ever at $17.1 billion. That is close to 90% increase from the previous record just 1 year before. Capacity will skyrocket. We're absolutely seeing that. We're predicting a 10 to 20x increase from 2020 to 2025. And if you assume that growth continues for the 5 years after that, which I believe it will, the outcome will be a radical leap from where we are today, right? New entrants, they're coming into the space. They will also drive change. Starlink, Amazon, China, these and others will look to capture existing and build new markets of satellite communications. More consolidation will happen as well. We announced the combination and the acquisition of Inmarsat by Viasat towards the end of 2021, and that would be the first of more to follow, right? There are currently more than 50 active satellite communications operators, and I would bet that there will be far less than half of that number in just a decade from now. Mm-hmm. And then technological innovation will accelerate, partly driven by the new capital that I just mentioned, but that innovation will be seen not just in the space sector, but on the ground as well, with better, faster, cheaper terminals, because terminals is a key point of access, and you want that to be at the cost point. So you'll get smaller terminals, cheaper terminals, and of course, more and more exciting use cases and applications. With all of this, I think it is safe to say that space-based communications will be one of the most interesting, most dynamic sectors of the decade. I would also note that it is important to understand for the world that satellite communications continues to develop. We've done some recent work for the Edison Alliance, for the World Economic Forum, that shows that for seafarers and those impacted by global disasters, Inmarsat will support more than 30 million people with essential connectivity. And that is real. It's not some marketing fluff. And it really, really matters. When connectivity is essential, we are there, because a lot of this connectivity is also about safety, whether that's in the deep sea or whether that's for airlines around the world.
Wonderful. I totally agree that this is going to revolutionize the way connectivity is seen as we get into the next 10 years or 20 years. But Rajesh, something which you mentioned earlier, that you're not participating in the B2C segment, which is understandable, and you start with more complex areas like B2B and B2G, etc. But then there is also this whole thought about latency requirements. Maybe I don't know whether the latency requirements in the B2C segments are going to probably be higher than what you need in the other segments. That's something which you can touch upon. And of course, we all hear about this hype around LEOs, the low Earth orbits, and MEOs, and all of that. And what do you think of this pure play LEO players? That's I'm going to sort of have a complex question for you this time around. And are you planning to get into this space, for example? I know that you're more of a GEO player, but what are your thoughts around getting into LEOs and maybe MEOs? I do not know. And broadly your thoughts around the latency balance, latency requirements across these segments, and why did you choose not to be in the B2C segment?
Yeah, I mean, we believe in a hybrid network approach. We believe that the combination of GEO, HEO, high Earth orbit, LEO, and 5G is the best approach. So we also want terrestrial 5G for some hotspots around the world, such as in maritime, such as in aviation. Think about Singapore Straits, very, very busy. And so we think terrestrial 5G can actually help offload traffic too. But when I look at the heart of your question, pure play LEO players, number one, I admire their courage and ambition, but I have many questions about their, business cases and impact on the environment. Right? Start with the business case. To provide global coverage with a pure play LEO constellation, you need a massive number of spacecraft. So Starlink is one example. Is talked about requiring 12,000 satellites, and that requires a lot of investment and a lot of resources. And when you factor in the 5-year average life of the LEO satellites compared to GEO, which is 15 years plus, it is pretty staggering. Right? In a recent report, I don't know if you caught it, it's Moffett Nathanson estimated that by the end of 2030, to support a 12,000 bird constellation, Starlink will need to have launched 23,000 satellites, given that 5-year lifespan, more than double the number of satellites launched by the entire world to date. Right? So a big number, big investments. And then on the environmental side, there is both the known and the unknown. The known is a significant increase in space junk. Right? That is a real problem. We have already seen several instances of space debris impacting activities on the International Space Station. Right? The end result could be what is known as the Kessler syndrome, in which space pollution becomes so high that collisions cause an unending cascade of follow-on collisions, each one producing even more debris. So basically, that would become a snowball effect in space with potentially disastrous consequences. The unknown is, well, unknown, right? We simply do not know, for example, the impact of more aluminium in the Earth's upper atmosphere. Last year, the journal Nature published an article raising questions about this topic and the risk of high-altitude alumina reflecting solar radiation in a new and poorly understood way. So I'm not saying we should stop everything, not at all. The technology leaps need to continue, but I'm saying that let's better understand the risks before we go too far with massive constellations. Think about all of the areas of environmental devastation that we've experienced over the last century here on Earth, and how many we should have sought to know more about, before we acted. So let's just know more. Ultimately, maybe the biggest issue I have with pure play LEO approach is that it is not the best way to meet customer needs, in my opinion. Customers want the right capacity in the right place at the right time. And sometimes it'll be LEO, driven by perhaps a lower latency or higher bandwidth in some situations, which, by the way, some people jokingly call it the least efficient option as well. But sometimes it'll be that. It can meet those needs, but with a lot of waste, as thousands of satellites traverse large parts of the ocean of the planet's most remote regions. So hybrid networks like Orchestra, this is this project we launched called Orchestra from Inmarsat. This uses a mix of GEO, LEO, and terrestrial 5G. I think that's just a more simple way and a more efficient way to meet customer needs, because not every customer needs, you don't need online gaming in the middle of your flight, but you do need high-speed connectivity. So you probably need low latency. You want to have these busy some 10 maritime hotspots are going to be so busy that we want to have 5G there, because if you are on geo and you're not getting good enough connectivity because of this capacity constraint, you fall back to 5G, and then the whole user experience for everybody becomes good because capacity is managed. On the other hand, we think there are some widespread hotspots, not smaller ones like I mentioned, like the Singapore Straits. I'm talking about widespread hotspots, and there LEO is good. So the approach we've taken is, I want to start from the use case. I want to start from the customer requirement, work back from there and see what the right technology is. And so we will launch about 175 to 200 satellites in LEO at the right time for the right use case and with the right business approach. So why we have not been in fixed broadband services is because I think Inmarsat is always focused. It started with saving lives at sea in the maritime business. That's the MAR in Inmarsat. And we focused on global mobility. That's our strength. We're a mobile satellite operator that connects all of these things, objects, systems, machines, assets on the move. And that's where we think is the fastest growing end of the market. Having said that, we're combining with Viasat, and Viasat actually does work in fixed consumer broadband.
Excellent. And I also you said, Rajiv, about the fact that the hybrid option may be something which people might feel it's a better option, right? So having a combination of what you want to do with the advantages of geo, with combined with some level of the LEO presence, etc. So I this area is developing, and as we see it, and then we're all looking forward to understanding what would be the best option, especially for a country like India. That was going to be my next question, saying that when you look at India, Rajiv, and you're very familiar with this country, how can India take advantage of, or even more advantage? I know that we're already using a significant level of, satellite communication at this point in time. But how do we ensure that we are able to do this, not just from a broad usage of technology, but also, can we use it for private-public partnership? Can we use it for making technology available in rural areas, schools and hospitals, and the underlying concern all of us have is that this technology also seemingly extremely cost prohibitive. So given that, sort of a backdrop, what is your thinking around, is it even viable for a country like India, especially considering the rural population that we have?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. I want to start with the latter part of your question, Rajesh. So, but let me start, if I may, by challenging the premise of your question, right? I think that satellite connectivity has more of a reputation historically for being expensive than what it really is, right? In many cases, that's not quite the reality. So it really depends on what is needed to be delivered and the options available. So for many rural areas in the world's remotest regions, the business case for fixed terrestrial or even mobile terrestrial coverage is just a non-starter, right? If you think about the cost and complexity of bringing terrestrial fiber to a remote village, I believe that in many cases, satellite coverage would be a downright bargain, right? So it's much more economical to do with satellite. That said, we do recognize that cost is an issue for all types of connectivity. And the reality is that we have to keep reducing the cost per bit. And we believe that lowering cost per bit is extremely important. So while Inmarsat is not in the business of providing fixed satellite services to consumers, as I said, like I said, we're also going to combine with Viasat, and they support connecting the unconnected through their community internet initiative. And this is really cool. With minimal local infrastructure investment, they establish connectivity in rural communities by installing community internet hotspots that connect to one of their satellites. So imagine a community Wi-Fi hotspot that can connect a number of homes, schools, etc. And they've done so in communities across Mexico, Guatemala, and Nigeria, bringing the internet within reach of hundreds of thousands of people previously either underserved or just unserved people. And that makes it more economical and more scalable. And I know they plan more as they bring new satellites online. And of course, India is one of those countries of opportunity as well. And then when I come back to the first part of your question, specifically about India and how can India benefit even more from satellite communications over the next decade, to start with, also consider the areas I already mentioned: connectivity for people and things on the move, in-flight connectivity, maritime, government, and more. India is certainly using all of these technologies today, but there remains a way to go to get the full benefits of what is available. Pleasingly, October last year, Inmarsat became the first company to receive the necessary licenses to deliver our Global Express broadband services to the government and businesses in India. Again, it's only focused on businesses and government, and we are partnering with our strategic partner, BSNL. And that's a significant step because it's broadband satellite services. I also think for India, there is an opportunity to leapfrog others by using satellite communications to enable the industrial Internet of Things, right? That is a sort of massive enabler for greater productivity, in the decade to come. So providing a complete and reliable connectivity for devices and machines is just a huge opportunity around the world. We talk about it in the context of 5G as well, but especially in India, with so many people in such a vast expanse of territory. And these technologies are increasingly accessible. They stand ready to help Indian businesses achieve growth, improve efficiency, enhance sustainability and safety. So what we are doing is we're working with a growing number of solution providers across the globe. We want to be able to start to do that in India increasingly as well. We help them to build satellite connectivity into their solutions so that they can work anywhere. So I'll give you a few examples. In Australia, we're helping FarmBot to monitor and control the water supply to cattle in remote ranches. In South Africa, we're helping Insight Terra to monitor mine tailings facilities. In South America, our partners use our network to control the electricity grid and rail infrastructure where terrestrial connectivity is non-existent. So IoT has so much potential. I've been a huge fan of industrial IoT for a long time, and India stands to benefit, I think, enormously through its adoption. I'm also interested in the next wave of Indian technology startups. I mean, that's a scene that's really happening, fortunately, and the potential for integrating satellites into their new solutions. And so I'm always keen to hear about new ideas from them. And so I encourage those companies developing IoT solutions get in touch with us, so that we can learn and help them support their objectives as well.
Perfect. Rajiv, this has been fascinating. I know I want to just close this, but before I close, I want to ask you one last thing for a 30-second answer, if you may. What are your biggest, what are your challenges as you look at the next, a decade or so, in your business, what would be the impediment or what are the biggest challenges that you see?
I think the biggest thing I would say in terms of technology breakthrough that I'm hoping for in the next 10 years is anything and everything that can help solve global warming. Collectively, we're not moving fast enough to address what is an existential crisis. So only with some remarkable new technologies will we be able to keep the planet temperatures at manageable levels. And that is something that we can help in as well. That is something that broadband overall can help in as well as over and above, connecting the unconnected.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you again, Rajiv. Look, it's been fascinating conversation. I learned a lot. I'm sure our audience did that as well. You gave a very, very good understanding of what everybody should know about satellite communication broadly, whether it's the geos and leos of the world. Something you mentioned about the option could be not just geo or leo, it could be maybe a hybrid as we move forward as organizations and industry as we develop. You talked about, you demystified, if you may, the cost equation and why, we all have this perception that, a satellite is more expensive, but, clearly that is not the case always. There's a lot to be considered before we go into some of that. You really dealt with the India equation and, what the applicability for a country like India, for example. How do we embrace, satellite communications to move forward? So lots of stuff. And I'm really happy that we had an in-depth conversation. So thank you again, Rajiv. Really appreciate you taking the time and then, being with us today. And then I just really wanted to make sure that, we end this conversation because we've run out of time. But again, appreciate all that you're doing for the industry and all the best with Inmarsat for you, Rajiv. All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Rajesh. Great talking to you. Real pleasure. And thanks to our audience as well.
All right. Over to you, Shreya. Thank you.
Thank you, Rajesh and Rajiv. Deep diving into space, satellites, and more. What a pleasure to hear them. We hope that space internet or satellite-based connectivity will change seamlessly connectivity across the globe, anywhere and everywhere. Over the next decade, we would see massive capacity from satellites, and accessing that capacity will become cheaper and easier, connecting people and things, not just everywhere in the world, but also as they move about everywhere. Truly futuristic and interesting times ahead.